Welcome to the Mainline Podcast. I am recording live from the headquarters of the SEC, Birmingham, Alabama. Just happened to work out for me this week. But my name is Adam Jaquez. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend Tyler Burton. And we've got SEC opponents for the 2024 season. Just skip right over the 2023 season. We're going straight to 2024, and we've got a loaded schedule. We're going to discuss that. We're going to talk recruiting barbecue, a big weekend for recruiting coming up this weekend. And then, of course, we'll touch a little bit about one of the best softball players ever to put on a Sooner uniform with some big news that just dropped earlier this week that everyone knows about. But I think we got some thoughts that we want to share there. But before we dive into any of that, Tyler, how are you doing?
I'm good, Adam. Who cares about the 2023 season? Let's just fast forward to 2024. If anybody out there was part of the SEC schedule reveal show that just made its way on the SEC network, everybody's fired up about it. Super excited. But yeah, Adam, things are good. Couldn't have picked a better week for you to be in Birmingham right now. Kind of funny how that works out, but things are good up here, man. Nuggets just won the NBA Finals. U.S. Open golf tournament starts tomorrow, and we got a little Champ U barbecue coming up this weekend in Norman. So things are good, man. Excited.
Yeah, I really couldn't have picked a better week because I work with so many Alabama and Auburn fans, and it's going to be an interesting conversation in the office tomorrow. I'm sure everyone's going to be want to chat my ear up on if I'm going to go to Auburn or how much Bama might beat OU by because Bama fans they're confident as they should be with the program that they've built up under Nick Saban. So let's dive in a little bit here. We can walk through each of these different opponents here, and Tyler, I'll let you pick the order here. Maybe it's just we go by most interesting games here, but OU gets 8 SEC games. One of those, of course, was going to be OU Texas. We all knew that. I think a lot of people thought, hey, I was going to be Alabama. Maybe that's where we should start, but OU hosting Alabama, probably the biggest home game since at least Ohio State in 2016. If maybe I'm not missing anybody there, but I would have to say at least since Ohio State.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the biggest since Ohio State. We'll just kind of run through these, Adam, go down them one by one. Obviously, we don't know which week these games are going to be played on, but we do know the home and away opponents for Oklahoma's 2024 inaugural season within the SEC. Obviously, Texas, neutral site down in Dallas. It's kind of unfortunate. Oklahoma is going to be the home team in 2024, so that takes away one of the home games that Oklahoma could have had in Norman. But you look at the 3 remaining SEC matchups that are going to be in Oklahoma. Alabama, you've got Nick Saban coming back to take on Brent Venables. That's going to be a fantastic matchup. 2 blue bloods of the sport. Josh Heupel in Tennessee, kind of the re-energized, the second coming of the Tennessee Volunteers. They've made their way back onto the national scene in college football. It's going to be nice having Josh Heupel coming back to Norman. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to round things out with having Shane Beamer, former, associate head coach, former special teams coordinator just a couple of years ago. He's going to be bringing the Gamecocks back to Norman for what should be a fantastic showdown between those 2 teams. And, those are 3 marquee opponents that Oklahoma's going to have coming to Norman. And then you flip it over to the other side, some of the away games, some of the, the away game destinations that Oklahoma is going to be forced to travel to. The SEC really didn't do the fine folks in Norman any favors whatsoever, kicking things off with Auburn. I know that Auburn's not quite what they used to be, over the last few years, but you've got to realize, too, that atmosphere. Auburn's always going to be a tough matchup, especially once you get late into the season. So that's going to be a tough one for Oklahoma. The 2 really that stick out for me, and Adam, we've talked about this on the podcast. If there were 2 matchups, 2 venues that Oklahoma fans could make their way to try to travel out there, kind of the premier destinations in the Southeastern Conference, OU's getting 2 of them right out of the gate in year 1 in the SEC, traveling to Baton Rouge, to Death Valley to take on the LSU Tigers inside Tiger Stadium. Hopefully that's a night game. I'm very excited to get down to Baton Rouge for that. And then obviously the big one, I know that in terms of, the brand, the prestigious logo on the side of the helmet, Ole Miss doesn't really give you that, but you get a chance to go out to Oxford, partake in the Grove, some of the pregame festivities. The SEC did no favors whatsoever with Oklahoma. There's no dipping your toe in the water in here. It's jumping straight off the diving board into the deep end. A brutal introduction. We'll dive into Texas's schedule here in a minute. They got a pretty favorable draw by comparison, but hey, it's what we signed up for. It's what you want. It's big boy football. There's nowhere to run and hide anymore after the 2023 season. So you've got to bring it each and every week, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We just highlighted, if you're not listening to us live here on YouTube, you really should be. It's the first time we're trying this out, so we have no idea what to expect, but we love the interaction from people that are viewing the content or following us on Twitter. 1982 Boomer Sooner, he also agreed with you. Hey, LSU and Ole Miss, two incredible road games. I think those are probably the main two ones that OU fans really wanted to go to. We get them year one in the SEC, and so I don't know if I'll necessarily be going to any of these games. I kind of think I might let it cool off and maybe go the second time around. But man, you couldn't ask for a better road schedule. I mean, there's so many interesting opponents. Even Missouri, I think that'll be a big game. There's a lot of OU fans in Missouri or in Kansas City or St. Louis even that maybe haven't made it out to Norman in a while. I'm sure they'll be looking forward to a matchup with the Tigers there, even though it might not be as big. The home schedule, like Alabama's huge. Tennessee is a big time name. I'm kind of unsure, like, what is Tennessee going to be, in 2024? They had a great year last year. What does Joe Milton do this year? Like, what are they going to be poised to be in 2024? Because I believe Milton will be gone at that point. So they'll have another new quarterback for Josh Heupel. And maybe he's got that program humming at that point. Maybe Bama's not what we think they are at that point. Everyone's kind of down on them this year. I'm not buying that. I'm not, writing a eulogy for Nick Saban. People have tried to do that before, and it has never worked out. But, I mean, maybe it's got to come to an end at some point for Nick Saban. And maybe he retires. Maybe the program starts to decline a little bit. I have no idea. It's just so hard to project out. But as we know things right now, this is a brutal schedule for the Sooners because not only do you have one home game taken away from you by going down to Dallas to play Texas, you have an incredibly tough schedule elsewhere, going to LSU, Alabama at home, at Auburn. I think Auburn's going to be a much different program 2 years from now than what they are today. Potentially with Tennessee, but like there's just so many good programs. South Carolina's on the rise. That's a team that comes to Norman. There's just no let up, no breaks in that schedule really at all. Even Missouri last year was giving Georgia, the game of their lives at that point. So it's not like Texas's schedule whatsoever, which is quite a bit easier.
Well, I think that's kind of the theme, Adam. No longer is Oklahoma and especially OU fans are going to be privileged to the fact where being part of the Big 12 Conference, you might have 2 to 3 marquee games that you expect each and every year. Texas, Bedlam, there's usually one other team in the fold that's always a little bit better than what people expect. But then you also have games like Kansas, games like Iowa State, maybe Texas Tech, where the excitement level isn't just quite there, and that kind of boils down to the team and to the coaching staff as well. But transitioning to the SEC, I mean, you just look at these first 8 games that Oklahoma's going to be playing in the SEC. Just look at the coaching matchups that's Oklahoma's going to be a part of here. Steve Sarkisian, Nick Saban, Heupel, Shane Beamer, Brian Kelly at LSU, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. So it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose the first couple of years into the SEC. And I know that we'll talk about it a little bit more once we get to Champion BBQ, because I do think that one of the things that is going to be a big factor for the overall success of Oklahoma, not just on a week-by-week basis, but in terms of the full season, it's the depth in your roster, especially in the trenches on both the offense and the defensive line. That's something that you look at Oklahoma's roster right now. Yes, it's a little bit better than what we saw from a year ago in 2022. But when you start, looking at the fact that you're going to have to go up in back-to-back weeks against Alabama, against Tennessee, you've got to go to Baton Rouge to take on LSU before going out to Oxford to take on Ole Miss. You've got to have a lot of, quality, able bodies on your roster that, are not just bodies, but they're guys that you can plug and play into the rotation that can make an impact for you throughout the 60 minutes of play. So, yeah, Venables has got to keep stacking up ranked recruiting classes. Champion BBQ is kind of the next installment this upcoming weekend where we can hope to add to the 2024 class. But, Adam, it's kind of funny. You look at the schedule for OU this year, just the home games, Oklahoma's 2023 home slate, UCF, Iowa State, West Virginia, TCU. You fast forward 12 months, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina. All 3 of those opponents, as it sits here right now on June 14th, are head and shoulders above any of the other 4 teams that Oklahoma is going to be playing this year. So Venables has got to win some games. He's got to build this roster up. He's got to get this team playing a more physical brand of football because it's coming. It's coming, and it's going to be a huge learning curve and something that Brent Venables and this football team, they're going to have to adjust fast because the SEC takes no prisoners.
Definitely. We know 2 of the non-conference opponents right now in Temple and Tulane.
Still got to schedule a third.
Yeah, Tulane might be tough. Well, we'll need 2 more because it's an 8-game conference schedule.
Yeah, you got to have 2 more.
2 more. So I think Temple, that's pretty straightforward. That's fairly easy. Tulane, they might be rebuilding at that point. They may not be what they are going to the Cotton Bowl like they are now. You'll probably have, my guess would be an FCS opponent. Get ready now. It's going to be an FCS opponent because that's such a short time frame really to schedule somebody. So I think that's where we're headed there on game 3. And maybe that's a game that is in the November time slot the SEC opponents typically have. And at this point, with that schedule, I'm like, I'm kind of okay with that. I'm a little bit okay with that to play an FCS opponent in November.
Well, that's par for the course in the SEC. That's how a lot of these,
is.
especially bottom feeder teams in that conference, they're able to schedule, 4 very winnable, almost guaranteed wins on their schedule just because the conference slate is so brutal. You just have to pick up 2 wins out of that 8-game conference schedule essentially to get bowl eligible. So, but it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, especially given the fact that 2024 is going to be the first year of the 12-team playoff format. That's going to be something where, as Oklahoma fans, no longer are you going to have to go out there and, go 10-2 or 11-1. This conference is going to be so good from top to bottom, especially adding in Oklahoma and Texas to what's already, the best conference in college football. Figure out a way to win 8 or 9 games. Even if you only win 8 games, figure out a way to beat Alabama at home. That's a huge marquee win. Probably won't be another better marquee win across the country. So just figuring out a way to, build this roster up, play a tougher, brand of football because it's something Oklahoma's going to have to do. And I'm really excited to see how it's going to turn out.
Let me ask you this in regards to non-conference, knowing that this is going to be a really difficult first year for Oklahoma, especially compared to Texas. Texas kind of got off easy a little bit on their first year in the SEC. If you're Joe Castiglione and you need to fill that 4th out-of-conference game with a Power 5 opponent. I know some names have been thrown out there. Would you rather go with a Washington, NC State variety type of team and say, hey, we're willing to do a home-and-home with a school like that because that's what they're going to ask for? Or do you go after a Rutgers, a Northwestern, that type of program that I think both have openings? They'll probably ask for a home-and-home. I don't know necessarily that they would even really want to play OU because they're already playing tough schedules in the Big Ten. They're trying to get bowl eligible, and you see this in the SEC. Kentucky and South Carolina would probably be the most similar programs. They're playing in-state rivals as their Power 5 opponent regularly, but I don't think Kentucky or South Carolina would ever schedule OU because they're trying to get to bowl eligibility.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and it kind of goes back to the Barry Trammell article that he wrote in the Daily Oklahoman a couple of weeks ago, where I think he rattled off 5 or 6 teams, like you alluded to. Duke and NC State were 2 of the 5 that he mentioned. So I think it's kind of an interesting situation that Josie finds himself in. You go down and you look at this 8-game, conference schedule that Oklahoma is going to be a part of now. It's a fine line between wanting to schedule teams where there's a very, very good chance, it's almost a guarantee that you're going to win. Or do you kind of go the opposite route? And this is kind of the route that, Joe Castiglione and Bob Stoops made famous, during their time in Oklahoma. And Josie continues that. It's you want to challenge yourself in the non-conference schedule. You don't want to start the season out 3-0 against 3 cupcakes, and then Alabama comes to Norman, Oklahoma. You really don't know what you've got in that locker room because you just simply haven't been tested yet. So if you can figure out a way, even if it takes a home and home that you've got to spread out over the course of a few years, schedule an NC State or a Duke, somebody that, yes, it's not the greatest matchup on paper, but it's still a Power 5 program. It's still Power 5 Division I athletes, and it's a better measuring stick that you can evaluate your football team on as opposed to scheduling, UCO or the Citadel or something like that.
Yeah. As someone that grew up in the Raleigh area, I would love to see a game at NC State or Duke. Either one of those would be really awesome for a kid like myself. So as far as the rest of the schedule goes, any other thoughts around either OU schedule or anyone else in the SEC? I know Alabama had a pretty brutal one. They're going to Wisconsin. They're playing a ton of tough road games between Wisconsin. I think they're at LSU, at OU. Man, that's going to be tough. Alabama's going to get tested again if they're still, that vaunted team that we think they will be 2 years from now. But any other thoughts around scheduling on the SEC before we talk barbecue?
Yeah, Alabama got a pretty tough schedule as well. Georgia kind of feels like the conference looked at their 2023 schedule and said, okay, we're going to crank this up a few notches for you, fast forwarding one more year.
Good.
Georgia's got a very tough schedule as well. And then let's just kind of look at the team a little bit further south down I-35. The Texas Longhorns 2024 schedule also we talked about it just a little while ago. OU being the home team in 2024, that takes away one of the home games. So by comparison, Texas gets the 4 SEC conference games in Austin this year. Florida and Georgia probably the two of the best three teams from the SEC East from what we've seen over the past few years. So getting those two teams at home is favorable. Kentucky at home is favorable. You're going to get Mississippi State not having to travel to Starkville. It's going to be nice having the Bulldogs come to your town. And then you look at the other three. The three games that's going to force Texas to travel away from Austin or the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, at Arkansas, which many OU fans will remember the last time Texas and Arkansas matched up in Fayetteville. Arkansas kind of wiped the floor with them. So that'll be a tough matchup. They get the cupcake game that OU fans were hoping for. Texas gets to go to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt, where, Vanderbilt's kind of a team that, depending on the season, depending on who the quarterback is, they can be competitive for a half or so. But Steve Sarkisian's group definitely getting the advantage compared to Oklahoma by getting to play Vanderbilt. And then the return of the Lone Star Showdown, Texas versus Texas A&M. That's one that many, many fans, whether you're a fan of A&M or you're a fan of the Longhorns, there's a lot of eyeballs that are going to be tuned into that matchup at Kyle Field towards the end of next year. So Texas, by comparison to OU, very favorable draw. But what else would you expect?
Well, I don't think there's a better way to illustrate this than what we tweeted out from our account about an hour ago when the schedule was released. On OU's schedule of SEC opponents, only one team that averaged fewer than 6 wins per year over the last 5 years, and that's South Carolina at 5.6. They're definitely a program on the rise under Shane Beamer. On the other hand, Texas had both Arkansas at 4.6 wins, average over 5 years, and Vandy, who was at 3.2. Now, they had OU that was at 10. They had Georgia that was at 12. But overall, I think Texas's schedule is very manageable, especially considering that one of their road games, actually the 3 road games they have are A&M. Yeah, that's going to be a crazy game. But the other 2 are Arkansas and Vandy. So all the good teams come to Austin, basically, at that point, other than OU, which is neutral. So, man, what a gift the Longhorns got. And so I think, in summary, the takeaway that I have from the schedule is, yeah, it's going to be exciting. It's great to have some of these big opponents, but the urgency just got cranked up another notch. The pressure on Brent Venables, the pressure on Jackson Arnold, the pressure on Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis to produce this year, 2-3 months, whenever the season starts here in about 2.5 months now. The pressure is even more immense than it was. And it was already extremely high here, but there's no favors done for the Sooners. They're going into, just an absolute brutal schedule in the SEC, and there's a lot of things they got to get right. They got to get this team functioning at a much higher level because, things can go south really quickly with a schedule like this. If you haven't done much, it's a what have you done for me lately fan base, sport, etc. So I think that kind of transitions well into the barbecue weekend, which is coming up, the biggest recruiting weekend of the summer. There's going to be a lot of big names on campus. There's going to be multiple 5-stars on the defensive side of the ball. But Tyler, from your perspective, which recruits are you keeping a close eye on here?
Well, I think that you definitely, especially with the release of the SEC schedule, with Oklahoma transitioning into that conference where success in that league is highly predicated upon how well you can play in the trenches. So for me, it starts on the defensive line group for OU. For Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis this weekend, Miguel Chavis, obviously, he's landed his fair share of elite recruits, within the last couple of cycles, specifically PJ Adebawore. But I'm looking at Todd Bates in this particular conversation here. And for me, Todd Bates, there's been so much talk about, it's relationship driven. He's the guy that's able to connect with these kids. He's able to connect with these families. And by all accounts, he 1,000% does. But we're not at Clemson anymore. You're recruiting what Oklahoma has to deal with, or what Todd Bates has to deal with at Oklahoma, is completely different than some of the things that he was able to take advantage of during his time at Clemson, especially being just a couple hours away from the Atlanta, Georgia area. So for me, I'm sticking in the defensive line group. David Stone, who's already on campus now, he's on his official visit, 5-star from IMG, the number 3 ranked defensive lineman according to the On3 rankings. But just going down this list, Adam, of some of we've got 6 guys that are going to be in Norman this weekend, all on their official visits that are part of this defensive line recruiting. David Stone, Joseph Jonah Ajanye, Nigel Smith, Dominic McKinney, the kid out of Louisiana, who's going to be tough to pull away from the Tigers. That's kind of the unspoken rule with recruiting in the state of Louisiana. But then you've also got Jay-Sean Ross, the kid out of Kansas City, Missouri, who, from everything that we've heard, that might be one of the next recruits that's getting ready to pop to make that commitment to Brent Venables, saying that he's all in. And like I said, man, you've got David Stone, you've got Nigel Smith coming on campus here. Nigel Smith, who's just coming off of a visit to Penn State. He's feeling the love out in Big Ten country. Joseph Jonah Ajanye, who Oklahoma, from everything that we heard, led for him coming off of his last visit to Oklahoma. He makes the trip out to Georgia a few days after the fact, and he's riding the post-visit high. Now everybody's flipping their forecasts and their crystal balls to the Bulldogs for JJA. It's going to be very important for Todd Bates this weekend, and I think it's going to be an all-hands-on-deck type of effort. You've got to do an all-out blitz this weekend on that defensive line class, because going into the SEC, I know that the talent has improved with the room that's currently in Norman, Oklahoma right now, but we're going to be losing a handful of those guys going into next season. We talked about Derek LeBlanc. He's in the transfer portal. He's leaving. You cannot go into next season. Yes, they're going to be true freshmen, but you cannot go into next season without nailing 2 to 3 of those guys that can come in and instantly be part of your rotation in the SEC conference. So I'm looking at the defensive line group, Adam. Starts with Stone, Nigel Smith. Figure out a way, see if you can make up some ground on JJA, and see if we can't land a couple of these guys.
I'm in agreement there. I think David Stone, Nigel Smith, those are the two names that everyone's kind of saying, yeah, OU feels pretty comfortable with those guys, but now's the time to slam the door shut. Nobody else gets in on that. And I think we saw Clemson do that with Sammy Brown. It wasn't a guy that I think a lot of OU fans were saying, yeah, we think he's going to go to OU. But you would have liked to have had Sammy Brown visit and take your chances. But Clemson did that. They did it with Bryant Wesco, the wide receiver that we all thought, hey, OU's probably right there, maybe a high 2 at worst. And Clemson shut the door on him too. Now's the time for OU to do the same thing. These guys that are coming on campus, David Stone and Nigel Smith, now's the time. Like, you guys got to get in the boat here. In my opinion, start building this class. Start getting other guys to come alongside you and shut the door on Ohio State. Shut the door on Miami or Texas A&M or whoever else it might be. Like, these are our guys. We're building for the SEC. You have to hit these guys. You have to make a hit on them. And then you mentioned Dominic McKinley and Joseph Jonah Ajanye, two guys that don't seem to be super high on OU's potential right now. But we saw last year, the barbecue weekend, a lot of guys came into the boat for OU. Now, OU didn't end up with all those guys necessarily. They wandered away at certain points. But you have to say, hey, that ability is there for Todd Bates, for Brent Venables, for Miguel Chavis to make such a big impact that can they reverse a trend, or can they get a guy like Dominic McKinley to say, yes, I'm on board. OU's my leader at this point. And worry about LSU down the road. Like, they're going to be a threat and all that, but at least turn the table so that you have a chance with some of these guys. And we're not going to option 3, 4, 5 like we were towards the end of last year. I think overall, even options 3, 4, and 5 are better than most of what Lincoln Riley was getting during his era. But you have to build a strong foundation there. On the other side of the ball for offense, is there a name that you're looking for there?
Let me put a bow on this defensive line recruiting, and let me make one last point here. We can sit here and talk about, with Miguel Chavis and Todd Bates and Brent Venables and Ted Roof, talking about how we're a relationship-driven recruiting staff. This is what our bread and butter is. This is what we pride ourselves on, building the relationship with these kids, with these families. But at the end of the day, the relationship, and especially with the way that with recruits prioritize things when it comes to making their college decision right now, the relationship only gets you so far. And I think that one of the things that Oklahoma, one of the biggest things that they're fighting right now is the fact that they're coming off of a 6 and 7 year. So you can say all the right things. You can take these guys to the nicest places to eat. You can, put 25 different gift bags in their hotel room. But at the end of the day, you've got to go out there this fall and you've got to perform. You've got to show these 5 or 6 defensive line recruits that, hey, we can stop the run. We've got guys that are consistently getting into the backfield. The defensive scheme that Brent Venables started with here at Oklahoma, took to Clemson and was elite, was number 1 defensive coordinator in the country. He's brought that back in Oklahoma, and we're no longer selling a vision of what we can do at OU. We're selling the results and what we're actually seeing on the field over the next few months, and that's something that's going to be big for Team 129 this upcoming fall, because relationships, that only gets you so far. The proof is in the pudding. You've got to go out there. You've got to make the plays. You've got to win football games. And the pressure is on Brent Venables this year, especially with the SEC looming in 2024. Flipping it over, Adam, I'll throw this over to you first. What's a position group or maybe a guy that Oklahoma needs to make an impact with this upcoming weekend?
I'll go a little bit, I think, off the radar, someone that not many people are talking about. How about Samaj Jones, the quarterback, also of the 2024 class? He's visiting, I believe, if I'm looking at my list right, he's going to be there at the same time as Michael Hawkins.
Yep.
From what I'm seeing here, yeah, which is interesting. I'm curious what the coaches have told both of these players, because it sure sounds like we're pushing as hard for Samaj Jones as we were for Michael Hawkins. Mm-hmm. And I think you really do want two quarterbacks in this class, because we're looking at basically Jackson Arnold in 2024 and Michael Hawkins, and that's about it at this point. So, yeah, I think you really would like to have Samaj Jones in there, and maybe he's a guy that never really touches the field for OU. If things go well, that's great. That's what you want. Maybe he transfers back to West Virginia or Penn State or whatever. But I think you definitely want a lot more bodies there and a lot more competition, because that room can get thin pretty quickly. Sure hate to have to play someone like Samaj Jones or even Michael Hawkins in year one in the SEC, but I think you definitely need some more guys there. But I think there's a position group that you might be taking here that definitely needs some ramp up on the recruiting trail.
Well, offensive line is definitely one that I'm considering, but I think the big recruiting weekend was this past weekend, where Oklahoma had a few more of their main targets in Norman right now. The big one for me this upcoming weekend, the big guy that's going to be on campus, 6'8", 330 pounds, Bennett Warren out of Sugar Land, Texas.
Huge.
The On3's got him ranked as the number 11 overall offensive tackle in the country. Oklahoma, hate to say it, they are trailing by a wide margin to the Michigan Wolverines. So Bill Beanbo, he's got his work cut out for him this weekend. I know that this is a guy just couple of hours down the road. Obviously, it makes a little bit more sense geographically for this kid to go to Norman.
Didn't Michigan do like a picture of him with like a giant dump truck or something like that?
Yes. Yeah, that's the guy. That's the picture.
What's the Oklahoma version of that? Like getting one of those like giant blades from like the propellers, the solar farms basically, or the wind farms.
That turnip seed up to the to the military base and have him bring a tank back. I think that's
tank,
or that's a little
get
bit
him
more,
out at like an oil derrick or something like that.
Yeah, just do something. To kind of one up Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. But yeah, Bennett Warren's another one for me. And Adam, two more here, and we'll make this quick. Linebacker, you look at this recruiting class that Brent Venables has got going on right now for the 2024. Obviously, there was a kid that Oklahoma thought that they felt really good about, thought that this was a kid that could have an opportunity to come in and, not just play at Oklahoma, but he had the potential to come in and be a guy for Oklahoma. And then out of nowhere, he commits to Illinois, and it kind of feels like that door's closed with how strongly this guy feels about what Brett Billum is doing up there with the Fighting Illini. So the linebacker position, there's only two that are going to be coming into Oklahoma this weekend on their official visits. James Nesta, the four-star kid out of Cornelius, North Carolina, kind of up there in your neck of the woods, Adam, a little bit. And then Michael Boganowski is going to be making his way down from Junction City, Kansas, the number one overall player in the state of Kansas. He's a three-star. I know, doesn't look like, especially on paper.
Do you think he's maybe a safety? He's 6'2", 195 is what he's listed at right now. I think some people kind of have him as a hybrid. And I know the funny thing for OU fans to say is, well, he's the cheetah. But
yeah, well, everybody wants to be the cheetah coming out of high school when you come play at Oklahoma. And I think that they've got him pegged to be more of a linebacker. I mean, let's not forget Lewis Carter going into his senior year. He was still sub 200. So this is a guy that obviously he's got the frame and the size and the athleticism to still put on probably a good 15 to 20 more pounds, before his time is done here in Norman. So the linebacker position is one for me. And then I'm going to close it out, Adam, with this. I know that could potentially be getting some good news on the running back front. That's the most that we're going to say on this podcast. We did hear some good rumblings today from some stuff going on behind the scenes in Norman this week during Brent Venables' football camp. But we've got arguably two of the top running backs in the country, both just a couple hours away, one coming from Longview, Texas, Taylor Tatum, 4-star. On3's got this kid rated as the #1 overall back in the country. Oklahoma's kind of fighting an uphill battle right now with USC. They just got the last visit for Tatum. And then next guy, and this is, if I could pick one running back for DeMarco Murray to lock up in this class, it's got to be the product out of Duncanville, Texas. 4-star Caden Durham. Yes, I know he's only 5'9", 195 pounds, but when you talk about speed, there's a difference between speed and elite track speed. And this Durham kid's got that from top to bottom. You watch this kid's film. I know he's rated a little bit lower on the pecking order than Tatum. On3's got him ranked right now as the #8 overall running back. But DeMarco Murray needs to figure out a way this weekend to land one of these two guys because Oklahoma's got to have another running back going into next season.
And you definitely want to get into that Duncanville pipeline because there are
Absolutely.
so many. I mean, they have elite linemen all the time.
Colin Simmons, arguably the top 10 player in the country. I know Oklahoma's not going to be getting him.
Yeah, but that's a school that OU hasn't done nearly as well with in the DFW area. So getting a guy from that school, even if he's at running back, that OU maybe doesn't need as much help. Like you could go get any number of different running backs around the country,
sure.
And that OU's found a way to produce at that position with pretty much anybody. But getting that connection is a big one. So hopefully we have some great news to talk about next week because next week we've got a great guest lined up. Captain 405's going to join us on the podcast. If you're not familiar with him, you should be. You should be following him on Twitter. He's a guy that he's at these camps. He's in with a lot of the coaches in that DFW area and around the state of Oklahoma as well. So a guy that's very knowledgeable about everything that's going on in the recruiting world. Usually before I see information on other pay sites. I'll just put it that way. So I'm excited to have him on the podcast next week to go a lot more in depth on some of the mindsets that these players are going through, some of the reactions that they get from the barbecue weekend, and then hopefully we can start to put some of the pieces together around, okay, here's who we have, here's what we need to go do going forward. So I'm excited to have the captain on next week.
Adam, if you're this coaching staff, at the Champion Barbecue this weekend, obviously we just had the big reveal, the big announcement, OU going to the SEC next year. These are the 8 opponents. Are you playing that up to these recruits that are on campus? Like, hey, you have the opportunity to come on and not just play right away, but you're going to be part of this team that's going to take on these 8 SEC opponents in the inaugural season of OU football.
I kind of think of it like before we were talking about, hey, we're going to the 5-star restaurant. We're going to the 5-star restaurant. Get excited. And now we can say, here's the menu. What would you like to order, essentially? And so now it's a lot more, tangible. It's something that you can kind of hold on to and be like, oh, okay, I can envision myself with the OU jersey on hosting Alabama here in Norman on this field that I'm standing on next to, the Lamborghini or whatever it is that they're going to be taking photos with this upcoming weekend. So I think that's huge. I do think you're playing that up, absolutely, especially with Alabama. You would love to have, Williams Nwaneri in this weekend because Tennessee's coming to Norman then as well. So I think you could be playing that up as well. Like, hey, you need to be on this sideline rather than that sideline because you will be a winner over here in 2024 when Tennessee comes to town, which he was in. It seems like that visit went well. I'm sure we'll ask the captain about that next week, get a little more detail there. But yeah, I think that's definitely something they're going to be playing up quite a bit.
Yeah, that's all I've got on it, man. Do we want to kind of end the show on a less positive note, a little bit more somber?
Yeah.
Topic?
Yeah.
I'll kind of let you. Let's just kind of dive into this. Obviously, now that the initial shock is worn off, and that is Oklahoma's ace pitcher for OU softball, Jordy Ball. Made the decision a couple of days ago. She's going to be transferring away from the University of Oklahoma. She's going to be going back closer to home. From everything that we heard, it kind of feels like Nebraska. That's the safe bet on where Jordy's going to end up. So, Adam, just kind of your initial overall thoughts on this move. I know that the group chat's kind of been on fire the last couple of days talking about this. Was it right? Is it justifiable? Is her legacy set in stone like so many OU fans have talked about? Just kind of what are your thoughts on Jordy, what she's meant to this program, and obviously the decision that she's made to move back closer to home?
It's so unprecedented, really, with any sport. You don't really see someone with this level of success just walk away without any other unusual circumstances. It's not for us to speculate. She only gave us that, hey, basically, she said basically, hey, I just want to be home. She's homesick, essentially. And that's fair. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to transfer. You're allowed to go back home. Like some people value that quite a bit. That's awesome. Go for that. I, I I guess it's, and I'm trying to be careful with how I say this
Yeah,
exactly. I appreciate everything that she's done. I'm very grateful. I'm very respectful of what she brought to this OU. She gave, you know, everything she had for 2 years, and she said, I'm done with that, and that's her choice. She's allowed to do that. I wish her success. I assume she's going to go to Nebraska. She didn't necessarily say that, which was kind of interesting. I assume that's where she's going to end up, and I hope she does well. I hope she's able to elevate that program. Um, but at the same time, you forfeit some things by walking away from OU. You're not going to be remembered at the same level, in my opinion, as someone who stays here for 4 years. Like a Jada Coleman, who's not playing at home. Like a Tiare Jennings, who's playing really far from home. Or Jocelyn Allo, who's playing across an ocean from
really
home.
far from home.
And everyone's different. Not everyone's going to want to be near home. I live thousands of miles away from where I grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up in North Carolina. I went through some of that homesickness, and I wasn't in college. I wasn't returning back home. I was out here working professionally in Oklahoma. So I kind of know what that's like. And sometimes you just need to get over the hump. And if it was me in those shoes, I probably would have done it differently. I probably would have said, hey, 2 years, I think I can make it through. Financially, it's going to be a huge benefit for me. I'm going to win a couple more championships probably. I'm probably going to get a statue of myself outside the stadium that I'm going to come back and visit someday with my kids and my grandkids. And, I can adjust some of the pressure aspects. I can ask for, hey, maybe I don't want to be the starter every time. Maybe I want to come be a closer or something like that. There's a lot of things I can change about that and say, hey, it's 2 more years. I can find some ways around that. Maybe I take even the fall semester off, for example. I don't know if that's even possible with NCAA rules, but potentially taking a semester off to spend more time at home. But I don't know. I'm not Jordy. I can't make that decision. She's allowed to do whatever she wants. And again, I'm grateful for the 2 years, but at the same time, I feel like you do forfeit some things as far as your legacy as a Sooner because I don't want to say the word quit, but like you said, hey, I just don't want this anymore. And that's okay to do. Mm-hmm. But
Sure.
It's different than the other players that are also going through the same pressures, that are also away from home, that are choosing to stay for 4 years.
Adam, we started hearing kind of some rumblings about this on Saturday, but we really didn't put much stock into it because kind of our overall consensus with what our thought process is there's no way that Jordy Ball, who just 4 days earlier helped Oklahoma win their 3rd straight national championship, earning herself World Series MVP honors, and in the process, that's 2 rings in 2 years. We thought there's no chance in hell that Jordy Ball would make the decision that she did to transfer from the University of Oklahoma. But as we started learning more and more about the situation, I think it became apparent real fast that this had everything to do with her being homesick, wanted to get back closer to her family, to her boyfriend, and had pretty much nothing to do with Patty Gasso and the softball that is OU, or the machine that is OU softball right now. But when you talk about the legacy that is left behind, 2 rings in 2 years, dominant, especially this last season. She finished the year with a less than 1 ERA. That's absolutely unheard of. But the opportunity that she would have had staying in a place like Oklahoma, she would have given OU, which again, it's still highly possible. As long as Patty Gasso is in Norman, Oklahoma softball is going to be just fine. We're probably going to be the preseason favorite to win a 4th consecutive national championship next year. But all that aside, Jordy would have had the opportunity to do something that has never been done before in the history of collegiate softball, winning a 4th consecutive national championship, but then also coming back for her senior year and her having the opportunity to win 4 rings in 4 years. That's never been done before in the history of college softball, and she would have been the best player on the best team at the most important position in the sport. So yeah, legacy, I can understand where you're talking about that a little bit, but I do think that one of the things, and again, we're speculating on a few things here. There's a couple things that we're going to shy away from. I think that one of the things that Patty talked about in the postgame, and even going back and listening to some of the postgame interviews that Jordy gave to some of the local media, pressure kind of took away the enjoyment from playing the game for this softball team. So I can understand the fact when you're playing on a team where, regardless of if you're playing UCLA or you're playing San Jose State, Central California, whatever, the pressure is on you to go out there and win every single game. And even if you don't win, even if you win by 1 run, people come away from that game thinking, well, what's wrong? It's simply not good enough. So I get where they're talking about from the standpoint of pressure taking away from the enjoyment, from the love of playing the game of softball. But that's also kind of what you sign up for when you play at a place like Oklahoma. So again, love and appreciate everything that Jordy Ball did. She's going to be welcome back here anytime. I hope that OU schedules Nebraska next season in a non-conference game if that's where she ends up, because she deserves the opportunity to come back to Oklahoma, get the curtain call, do the final farewell send-off. She's earned that with what she gave to this program. But it's not fair for any of us to sit here and judge her for the decision that she made. We can dissect it. We can weigh the pros and cons. But at the end of the day, this is her life. This is her opportunity. This is her decision. And you got to applaud her, because I can't even imagine being a fly on the wall in that room with Jordy when she sat down and she told Patty and Ben Rocha what her plans were, what she was walking away from Oklahoma, the opportunity that she was leaving behind with this team, with this program. I can't even imagine the guts and the courage that it took for her to do that. So yeah, hate to see her go, but wish her nothing but the best.
And I don't want it to get lost. Like, I think we're being more realistic about the situation than maybe some people. I think some people say, oh, all you can do is thank her and respect her. I'm like, yes, you can do that. You can also, at the same time, being very thankful and being very respectful of her, also say, I probably would have done it differently. And I'm also going to elevate other players that are going through the same challenges and saying, they're going to have a better legacy at the same time. And that's okay. Like, that's her choice. She's able to go do that. I hope she is happy. I hope that she marries her boyfriend and doesn't regret this, like breaks up with him in 3 weeks or something crazy like that. I hope it works out well for her, but, and I say that because, people have crazy relationships. I don't think she does. I think she's very mature, but, you always wonder about college.
Here's what I'll say on this, Adam. This will be my final take on it. At the end of the day, the person is more important than the athlete. And if she thought that the opportunity for her to go back closer to home, to be closer to her family, to be closer to her boyfriend, her grandparents, have an opportunity to grow the game in the Midwest and possibly do something for Nebraska, if that's where she plays, possibly do something for Nebraska softball that's never been done before in the history of that program. I get it, because at the end of the day, if you're not happy with yourself, you're not happy with anything else. So I applaud her for making that decision, doing what was best for her, chasing after, what she thought was going to give her the greatest fulfillment of joy in her life. So yeah, we hate to see her go, but you've got to applaud her for the courage and the fact that she was able to make the decision, and she's doing this for, not just her friends and her family, but she's doing what's best for Jordy. And that's all you can really ask of somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I hope she does well. Hopefully,
I do too.
I don't really want to see her in Oklahoma City because I feel like that would be kind of awkward in a way. But I also want her to be successful. So I guess bring it on. Like, get to Oklahoma City, but maybe don't face OU. That just feels a little.
And if she does face OU, I hope OU puts 10 runs on her.
Yeah,
but that's part of. We're going to be cheering for every other opponent that she faces, but she matches up against OU. Then we're on this side for a reason. So nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, I'm not at all worried about like where OU goes from here. I think I don't know why Nicole May and this fan base just can't get on the same page. I mean, I think she's elite. She's not perfect, but I think she can be a number one pitcher for OU. I think Kirsten Deal is legit, and you may not get a better pitcher than those two, but I think that's really good. I think you can roll with that. Like a lot of teams roll out with two pitchers and maybe they have a third or fourth that maybe are a little bit lesser that you could use just for depth throughout the season to kind of keep those top two fresh. But I'm not worried if OU doesn't get a big transfer name. And I know OU fans focus around like the two best pitchers they saw in the postseason because it's hard to follow the entire sport and we don't know all the other names. And so OU fans just think about the two names they saw in the postseason.
Adam, we didn't know who Alex Storako was.
Exactly.
This time a year ago, before she transferred to Oklahoma, and she just had one of the best seasons ever.
Hope Trotwine was a player that OU had faced at North Texas, but it's kind of like, oh, they're a smaller school, and she helped us win a national championship the year before. Yeah. So there's going to be someone that jumps in, and if Nicole May and Kirsten Deal are your top two, this team's fine. this team's fine. Like, we're
We're
going
gonna
to get
be
some other
just
hitters as
fine.
well. There's so much depth across the board. And, I mean, you look at, the defense that's behind Jordy Ball. Like, much of that still comes back. Jada
Mhm.
Coleman is an elite center fielder on defense. Tiare Jennings could potentially go to shortstop, but she's right there in that middle infield. So there's a lot of great defenders around those pitchers that make them look so much better than they actually are in some cases. And
Yeah.
so that's not going anywhere.
Hmm.
Not to discredit Jordy, like she was getting strikeouts.
Hmm.
That's all pitcher at that point.
Adam,
But
go ahead. Sorry.
no, I mean like that was kind of the point. Is like I'm not at all worried. She's been probably placed on a pedestal more than any other pitcher in program history. And so
Hmm.
I think that worries some OU fans, but like this is a team game still at the same time.
We've talked about this across multiple sports. I kind of feel like over the past few years with OU that no one player is bigger than the program. And for me, as big of a loss as this is, and I don't want to diminish it, Oklahoma just lost arguably the best player and hands down the best pitcher in the country. 1000%. No arguing that whatsoever. But the last time I checked, as long as Patty Gasso is leading the charge, as long as she's the head coach, and as long as Jada Coleman and Tiare Jennings and all of these girls are going to be back next year, I fully expect Oklahoma to make some moves in the transfer portal, bring in a couple of difference makers like they did a year ago, both in the field and in the pitching staff as well. Oklahoma's going to be fine. Just give it some time. Once fast forward 7 or 8 more months, once softball season, once practice gets going, once the season turns the corner, Oklahoma's going to be fine. And Adam, I've got two last things for you: one football, one baseball. I want to talk about this because ultimately, when you look at Oklahoma going into the SEC for their first year, you can't help but make comparisons. Look back at Missouri and Texas A&M going into their first year. Texas A&M ultimately had the Heisman Trophy winner, the best player in school history in Johnny Manziel, but he was also a freshman going into SEC year one for Texas A&M. Jackson Arnold is in the same shoes right now. He's going to be in the same spot, given the same opportunity. If you're Jackson Arnold, what's going through your head right now when you look at this schedule? You know that Dylan Gabriel's not going to be on campus next year. You're going to be handed the keys to this Ferrari, and it's your time to drive it going into the SEC.
I think Jackson Arnold is just praying that the freshman and sophomore offensive linemen are legit this year, and that PJ Adibare on the other side is all he's hyped up to be and more. Because the difference between A&M and Missouri was Johnny Manziel, best player in school history, possibly difference maker, and then Missouri was a pretty healthy program, I believe, led by James Franklin, not the Penn State head coach, but a
Yeah.
quarterback by the same name. I'm pretty sure I have that name right. The weirdest, college football player to remember, but that was a program that was really healthy and was kind of a curveball. That was a Big 12 team playing against SEC defenses that were not used to playing that, and so they found
Yeah,
a lot of success
exactly.
there. OU is neither of those. Maybe Jackson Arnold is the elite player that Johnny Manziel is potentially, hopefully, but they're not a healthy program right now, and they're not a curveball in the SEC. So,
Mhm.
got to get healthy this year. You have to. Like,
Yeah. Well, and,
you
and
have to
Johnny
win
also had
10
Johnny
games.
also had a couple of first round offensive linemen. He had Mike Evans, Ryan Swope. Oklahoma, as it sits right now, I don't forecast them
We
having.
have a Ryan Swope,
Well, yeah,
Gavin Freeman.
to an extent. We'll see. I expect big things out of A2 this upcoming season. Last thing for you, Adam, and this ties in with Oklahoma baseball. Kendall Rogers just broke the news just a few minutes ago. OU baseball will hire Todd Butler as its new excuse me, damn, can't talk. New recruiting coordinator. Butler has extensive SEC experience at Arkansas, Alabama, and was previously a head coach at Wichita State. From looking at the comments within this post, seems like this is a fantastic hire for Skip Johnson's bunch.
The former head coach at Wichita State.
Former head coach at Wichita State. He
Okay.
was AD for external affairs at McNeese most recently.
I'll have to do some more digging on him, but that could potentially be a really
Sounds like
good
an
hire.
upgrade.
Yeah, I think there was something stupid like 31 Wichita State players in the portal. So, I mean, and there's some really good ones at that. So, that would be a guy that you probably want to have on this staff. And I know we've heard a couple of things about how maybe some of these coaches in the past haven't hit the recruiting trail nearly as hard as maybe they
Mm-hmm.
could. So maybe this SEC move is kind of a kick in the seat of the pants to, hey, like, look at who's all doing the hosting over here. And I know not many of them made it to Omaha at the end of the day. It's very tough to do that. But yeah, you have to recruit a whole lot better. And we saw that, hey, this year when we had all these guys that left the program, we didn't, we had an adjustment period before this team got back on track towards the end of the year. So that's very exciting. We'll see. And maybe we'll have some more opportunity to talk baseball as the offseason continues. I hope we have more good news to talk about there. But that's exciting, especially coming off a year where we had a record high in fan attendance. So you love to see it.
Yeah, that's all I've got, Adam. Let's close it out, man. Let's get us out of here.
Yeah. Well, appreciate everyone watching, listening. We're on YouTube Live this week, so we appreciate those that jumped in with the live comments as well. And make sure you follow us on Twitter as well at the Mainline Pod. Been working on a few little graphics that I think people really enjoy. Shared a few with Tyler. They seem pretty hype. We'll see if we're able to use them maybe this weekend with some good news from the barbecue weekend.
Please, God. We need linemen.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for participating this week. We will see everyone again next week to wrap up the barbecue weekend with Captain 405. And again, appreciate everyone listening. We'll see you next week.